three things in life. Life's a sales game, a numbers game, and a risk game, right? So I learned sales. Now I'm learning about numbers.
Welcome to Inspired by Success, the podcast where I deep dive into the mindset of successful entrepreneurs, CEOs, and thought leaders. Get ready to be inspired and gain valuable insights to unlock your true potential. Okay, Pradeep, your journey is incredible. Take me back to your life and where it all began and how it shaped the man you are today.
Sure. So actually it began in the Middle East. My grandfather particularly, actually no, my great-grandfather I should say, was into politics. And that kind of set the precedent for my family. But unfortunately, my grandfather and his dad, due to war in Sri Lanka, lost most of the family assets. I'm not blaming anyone at all. War's war. So my dad did his first kind of migration to Kuwait. He was quite entrepreneurial himself. He trying to set up a restaurant business. So my mom joined him. And then I was born in Kuwait City, in Kuwait. Then we went back to Sri Lanka because it kind of all settled down. Then there's a big hoo-ha and the whole war started again. So this time, my dad got out first, came to the UK. And I remember distinctly, my mother came to me and goes, "Your name's not Pradeep, your name's Raj. Here's a passport, and this is how we're going to get out of the country." So she put me in a truck, got on a plane. Very brave woman, not much English, but nerves of steel. First time we actually tried to get out of Sri Lanka, we got stopped at Qatar and returned to Sri Lanka. So we tried again on the plane. A funny story, when we got caught in Qatar, I was in a lift and she's like, "Pradeep, pay attention," right? And I was quite sharp. I'm like, "Well, my name's not Pradeep, it's Raj." So I was playing along with her. So we got back. Eventually, we landed in London, and then life started. I was 6 years old. I didn't know what. You don't know what you don't know. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that resettlement was in one of the toughest social housing projects, or council estates as we call it, in Northwest London. It was like a drug manufacturing center. Thank God I didn't get into any serious legal troubles or anything of that sort. But it was the wrong kind of crowd around me, kind of wrong ambitions, wrong goals. So that was kind of my early childhood, and that's what led to like a dropout, not making sense of education. Don't know where education leads to. Got into a lot of fights, and really dropped out of school. That was early childhood.
Did you drop out of high school?
Yes. You can call it a dropout. The Americans will call it a dropout. Technically, I stayed until the end, but I didn't get much grades.
Okay.
So really, high school was useless here, particularly in the UK. If you don't get any grades, you're kind of an outcast.
You turned it all around and you ended up getting a PhD at top universities, which is mind-blowing. So where did this switch in determination come from? How did your mindset evolve during this rapid transformation? Like, what was that pivotal moment?
I get this question a lot. Yeah, people ask me the question about, I was in a serious gang fight at 21. But before that, I always point that back to the individual who I am. And I found weightlifting. I tried a lot of different martial arts, but I found weightlifting when I was 15. I was a semi-pro weightlifter. I loved weightlifting. It was just me and the bar and heavy weights. I always say 200 kilos is my best friend, because on a bad day or a good day, it's still 200 kilos. And he'll tell you, you can't lift now, today, or not. It's always honest to you. So weightlifting gave me confidence, and it was the first time I learned short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. It's really funny, Linda. Just a couple of weeks ago, I went back and I still have 18 years of notebooks. I used to religiously take notes, saying what I've done today, how I can improve next week, and so forth. So even if I was a high school dropout, I was still learning by short-term, smart goals and so forth, writing things down. So that was a pivotal moment where I learned discipline. Sometimes I didn't even go hang out with friends because I had to go to the gym, and self-awareness and self-confidence and building and so forth. So I play a huge part for my kind of early childhood development to weightlifting. Then after that, 16, when I left high school, I was in sales, 16 to 21. So I worked in supermarkets, shoe shops, fashion shops, bars and clubs, real nitty-gritty, learned London. Maybe we were not wealthy enough to travel the world, but London was there at our doorstep. So I learned a lot of different nationalities. I can see quickly cultures and interact very well. So I was learning people and I was learning sales. And then that 16-21 period, I was still getting in trouble in and out and so forth, wrong crowd. And at 21, I got into a serious gang fight that left me in a coma for 4 hours. I got hit over the head and so forth. I woke up. It wasn't kind of an epiphany kind of big moment. What happened? I didn't see God. I didn't see angels. I didn't see anything. What happened is I woke up alone and I was like, where are my friends? Where are my family? What am I actually doing with my life? I said, look, I can do sales. I'm good with people. What I love is weightlifting and sports. Let me try to get into. Even if you didn't have education, you knew education for where you come from is the only way out at that time, right? Because you didn't know about business, entrepreneurship, and so forth. So, second lesson in life, I always tell the kids now and keynote speeches, three things in life. Life's a sales game, a numbers game, and a risk game, right? So I learned sales. Now I'm learning about numbers. I made three phone calls, Linda, and one of them was a lovely woman called Janet Hudson, not the singer, a different person, picked up the phone and she's like, yeah, come over. And she goes, well, you're 21 now. You're a mature student. So that means that we can give you a access course. That means you compress all your early education, high school education for the four sciences in 1 year, and that can allow you to do a degree. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I done an access course, and then my educational journey started. I had no dreams of Oxford or Harvard, had no idea. And this is where I say inspiration comes from small things. The first essay in my first year that I gave in, I actually got a first class. It shocked me a bit. I wrote well and I researched well. I'm like, hey, I can get a top grade. What's going on? I just put my head down and I kind of dreamt bigger and bigger, kept getting good grades. I worked hard in the library, just dedicated myself. The second and third year I got scholarships, so you didn't have to work. And then what I did was I started dreaming and I said, you know what, I really like the sports stuff, but the medical stuff I really like, particularly the drug discovery side, the research side I like a lot. So, and I said, how am I going to get to Oxford? And then I remember, I tell you something, a very nice professor, and he's being very helpful. He goes, look, you're clearly talented and you got drive. But he said, these individuals, there's a system and they'll look at you saying where you're from. So he said to me, how will you get to Oxford? How are you going to get to Oxford? I said, it's simple. I said, I'll take the train from Paddington. So that's what I did. So on summer, I got a scholarship to go to a conference in Oxford. So I walked around Oxford on that conference and just assimilated myself. And then next summer, I got another scholarship to work in the labs. And I just said, you know what, I'm going to pack my bag one day. And I just went to Oxford for a day, randomly walked in. I walked into colleges that were open, started talking to the students, professors. They're like, who the hell is this kid, right? So it's all about getting my mind right. And then I went
Preparing
for it. I
yourself, were you
got
like,
a first class. Yes. Yeah, exactly right. Preparing myself, exactly like visualizing lifting weights, visualizing myself there. In fact, I'm very open and honest in podcasts. The first thing I do in my morning is, I get a coffee and I just walk around to music or randomly and just not, I'll say dream, but live the day or live certain scenarios in the upcoming year or my achievements. Sometimes I will even celebrate achievements before it even happen, like a milestone or receiving an award or hitting goals, or how will I rejoice in the emotion if my company gets to 100 million or a billion. And it sounds crazy and I really don't care, but these are the principles that's worked for me. It might not work for you, but it's worked for me. So I visualize these things. So Oxford was a real visualization. Then I went back. By the way, people might say, the really educated people might say this is cuckoo stuff, spiritual stuff, but they'll call it, or others will call it prep. Some will call it practice. In the media, they call it pre-show or dress rehearsal. Same thing, but this is called visualization, right? It's just that there's two different worlds, and somehow one world's bad than the other. So I don't buy it. So anyway, coming back to Oxford thing, so I walked around. So then I said to Linda, well, let me apply. The first thing was 20 odd rejections. So I said, okay. I said, how am I going to get there? I wanted to get there not because of, yes, it's a great bar, but it's a great place to learn and meet people and also expose yourself to great scientific techniques that you can really elevate yourself. So I always, dream big, massive, bold goals, right? So then I got rejected 22 times. And I said, okay, Pradeep, it's a numbers game. But I always say a rejection is a misconceived perception. So you're projecting a wrong perception of yourself, or someone is perceiving you wrong, not because you're wrong yourself. So how do you change that perception? So I said, okay, there's Oxford is Oxford. They probably like some students in other tier universities. So I say, let's go I shouldn't say one step down, but I went to Imperial College London. Great university, a bit like MIT. So after 13 rejections, I got a scholarship at Imperial, put my head down. Another 22 rejections, 47th application, I got my PhD at Oxford. And that's how I got to Oxford. And in Oxford, it just changed my life.
Incredible. So working for a biotech company, but then you ended up leaving That is that right? You transitioned from
Yeah.
corporate role to finding your own eight-figure company. Would have definitely involved a lot of risks because you were comfortable. You were a VP at a company. So why? What made you want to do your own thing and create your own company?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Steve Jobs once said, you can only link the dots looking backwards, right? So if I come back to the story, so I always say I'm a serial dropout, not a serial entrepreneur. I'm a serial dropout. I dropped out of high
A
school.
dropout.
So now I wanted to be yeah, serial dropout. I dropped out of high school, and then my second dropout was coming. It was out of academia. So Oxford, I loved what I was doing. Totally fell in love. 4 years, I won all the international awards and so forth. So I went to my professors. Some of them were Nobel Prize winners, by the way. I said to them, hey, I've got three ideas. I need 300 million, and I think we got drugs for osteoarthritis. They're like, kid, listen, you're 27, you're ambitious, you're talented, but it doesn't work like that. And they're totally right, Linda. There's nothing wrong with them. 30 years, you do some research, you go back, get some funding. You go back, you do some research, get some funding. But I'm very impatient. I hate the saying, patience is a virtue. Patience is only a virtue when you look back. So I said, I'm going to drop out the second time. I'm going to drop out of the academic career. So I dropped out of high school. The second thing I done is I dropped out of traditional academic career. So I said, look, guys, I've been broke before. I can go broke again, right? That's not a problem. So what I did is instead of working 8 years in a lab, I said, how can I accelerate this? So this is where the entrepreneur mindset comes. So I wrote for my own fellowships, and Lord behold, I got a Fulbright fellowship to go to Harvard. That's how I got to Harvard. By the way, I used the same principle to get to Harvard. My last year of Oxford, I saved my scholarship money because when you're a PhD student, you're quite poor. But I saved my money and I got a cheap plane ticket and lived in a hostel and walked around Harvard and pretending I was at Harvard and meeting all these professors. I didn't meet these professors, and one introduced me to another and introduced me to another. And that's how I got my Fulbright scholarship sponsored lab. So I went to Boston, Harvard for 9 months, got the credential, came back, no job, no fellowship in the UK. I'm like, okay, let's just hang in there, right? So then I got another fellowship, went to Israel, time of my life in Israel at the Hebrew University, came back, no job, nothing. Then I got another fellowship in France, the Sorbonne University, France's best university. I went to
What's a
Paris,
fellowship? Sorry,
stayed
can I
there. Oh,
can I
yeah,
just
sure.
ask what's a
Sorry. A
fellowship?
fellowship is like, yeah, a fellowship is a short term placement where you go and learn from a esteemed fellow, a professor or a lab or a department, and you learn something that you need or your country needs, and you bring it back. So I
All right,
went to
cool.
America to learn something in the gut health, went to France about osteoarthritis, went to Israel about protein science. So I brought it all back. I said, hey, look at me now. I struggled for 18 months, 2 years, broke as crap. And like, hey, can I get a fellowship and work on my drugs? They're like, nope. I'm like, this is great. So this is where I dropped out of my academic kind of traditional path, and I made 272 phone calls. And finally, a person in China picked up, and they're like, the story to China was crazy. Finally, they picked up and they said, come over, right? Do you want to hear the story to China, how I landed that?
Yeah.
So I sent my CV and applications to so many people. By the way, rejections are a wonderful thing. There's some very good people out in this world. I always remember the professor at Detroit and University of Southern California. They knew that I was a 29-year-old kid and I had no right to apply for a professorship. But these guys saw the application. They're like, look, they said, kid, this is a really good application, but this is where you're going wrong. This is where you're going wrong. They had no intention. It's unheard of, but they still helped with some golden nuggets, and I took that on board. So if even 200 rejected, those two people really helped me, right? Someone's going to help you somewhere if you play the numbers game, right? So I took those, and eventually I tried to the Chinese university, and there's a city called Qingdao in northeast China. The dean, the head of the School of Health Sciences, had my CV on his desk. The associate dean, the deputy head, came in and they were talking about something, and he looked at it and he's like, what's this? Like long Sri Lankan name CV. And the dean's like, there's this guy that went to Oxford and Harvard and he wants an associate professorship in northeast China. I think he's a scammer or a prank, because who would ever come here, right? And he's like, no, 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 but I recognize the names on the CV because these are good labs and I recognize them. I'll give them a ring, the deputy head. So he rang me. He's like, hey, I saw this are you for real? Then I told him the whole story. He's like, well, I don't have something, but my friend in Nanjing has it. So I went to Nanjing and they said, well, we don't have something, but my friend in Suzhou has it. So the numbers game meant that my CV landed on someone's table that was viewed by someone, his friend, then his other friend gave me a job. So
Wow.
I was 29 years old and I was associate professor, 2 years after my PhD. All my friends on the PhD course were still trying to find jobs or trying to find a career. So I landed in China and just rocked it. I worked very hard. I had great students. I had great people. 30 years, those four drugs we discovered in 18 months. And so that was my stick it to the system. This doesn't work, even if you have PhDs or so forth. Yeah, I got approached by a guy. And I'm coming back to your question. Sorry if I'm talking long because I wanted to put context. Because I realized the importance of dropping out and taking risks. So that's now it comes. Life was teaching me a risk game. Guy approached me and goes, "Hey, you're incredibly talented, but do you think you can run a department for business development?" I'm like, "All right, let's have a go." Because I learned everything in science, and I wasn't developing in terms of I discovered the drugs, and there's no ego. And by the way, I tell a lot of people there's a difference between ego and identity. And I always say the ego is actually good. We teach our kids and others to like shun your ego. But I say the ego is the skin. It's like who you are. It's self. It's you. You can't change that. And you got to accept it and utilize it. The ego is good in certain situations. But identity is like the clothes you wear over your skin. Or I am a scientist. Or I went to Oxford. Or I went to Harvard. Or I'm a dropout. You identify yourself with those things and narrate a story. But if you just clear yourself out, the possibilities are endless if you don't identify with something. So at that time, I didn't identify myself as all this science credentials. So I'm like, let's go for it. Let's learn something new and go into business development. Again, put my head down, worked my butt off. I came up with great ideas. I was in charge of 600 people eventually with 400 million in budget to manage. Yeah, I was 32 and we're merging, acquiring, and then the pandemic hit. So that's where, coming back to your question, before my entrepreneurial journey, so that's where I switched from academia to corporate. I had three dropouts, because high school dropout, traditional academia, then dropout into corporate. And my fourth dropout was coming in life, which was corporate to entrepreneurial.
And so far, it's been quite a journey for you. Tell me, like, you did so many achievements. Now that you're, an entrepreneur, give me some challenges that you've had to face or successes. Can you share a specific success or failure that has had a massive impact on your journey? What lessons can you learn? Like, can you share from that experience?
Yeah, so I got into entrepreneurship because, again, it's always been about the system telling me that I can't do certain things, or you're at a certain age, or you didn't meet a certain criteria. So when I was in China, I was actually, when the pandemic hit, we were all told to go to a certain hotel to eat. As expats, we had no kitchen in our flats. It was like a communal kitchen downstairs, and we had chefs and stuff and so forth. Everything was shut down, so we had to go to a hotel to eat. I turned up in a hotel. I was the only foreigner left in Suzhou. Everyone had to go on, right? So I'm very social, by the way. If anyone meets me, you realize I like to have a chat. So I look around and all these Chinese men are there with their front laptop. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You should be locked down, right? And they're like, hey, we own factories. Like, we kind of control the city. We don't have to be locked down. And I'm like, let me see your numbers. Your factory, I'm doing business. What do you like? $400,000 a day, 200% ROI. I'm like, what do you sell? They're like, we sell like simple, boring things like toys, lint rollers, tissue, kind of storage items. I'm like, where do you sell mics, cameras, water bottles, phone case covers, and so forth, right? I was like, this is
Are they
crazy,
selling it
right?
international? Were they selling it international, or were
Yeah,
they selling it in China?
yeah, no, internationally, or in China, but mostly now internationally through Amazon Marketplace and so forth. I'm like, what is e-commerce? I totally oblivious, right? So I got to meet and talk to them more and more because I've been having lunch and dinner with them now, right, in the hotel. And then I need to get into this, right? So this is where entrepreneur stuff comes in. I'm like, let me try to sell some stuff in the UK through Amazon. They're like, no. I'm like, come on, let me try it. I'm like, nope. So again, it's the hustler's mentality, right? That kind of streetwise Pradeep. And so I'm like, all right, cool. So how can I help you? They're like, you can't. And then eventually I realized, so eventually, Linda, I was doing high level VP and R&D stuff, and in the day. In the night, I was actually doing Amazon translation case reports for all these CEOs and their teams, right? Because I was translating cases for their and answering back customer service reports because their English wasn't the very best, and I was kind of directing them. So I won their trust, and eventually one of them said, "You can sell toys." So from China, I was selling toys into the UK, and I started a business, side hustle. Thank God I did, and this was one of my success that I took the risk because when I came back to the UK after like or mid 3 quarters into the pandemic, I tried for 8 months, try to get a VP and associate professor job. They're like, no chance in the UK. Not because they're bad people, but they said, look, you're 33 by that time, or 34, I think. No one gets a VP associate professor at that kind of age, and like the experience brilliant, but it will upset the apple cart, right? Which they're right, because sometimes you need 20 years experience to get to that level, right? So I tried 8 months very hard, and I was like, look, you know what, I've done everything. Again, there's no identity here. The ego is fine with some, like my fourth dropout. Dropped out of corporate, dropped out of science, and went straight head into entrepreneurship. So the best thing I done was actually help those Chinese factory owners with their customer case studies. So I started my entrepreneurial journey. And it's been a lot of failure, and it's like I had to roll up my sleeves. The worst lesson is that you can't predict. You don't know what you don't know, and you'll get attacked a lot from different angles. So you just have to, particularly if you're highly ambitious, so you got to be God mindful. You'll take the hits. You will be in debt someday. You will be in loss, and you need to handle that. I think entrepreneurship or in life is success is directly proportional to two things: a risk appetite and how much you can handle pressure. It doesn't come down to IQ or EQ or this brilliant background. Those two things, risk appetite and how you handle pressure. So yeah, so those were kind of learning two curves, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years of my entrepreneurial journey.
Wow. So what are you currently doing now in terms of e-commerce? Are you mainly sticking to e-commerce? I know
No,
I'm in the
it's a
e-commerce
great
world myself, so I totally understand about the risk management and debt and the cash flow management as well. Talk about
What are you
that.
selling,
So
by the
give
way?
me some.
Are
I
you
sell
selling on
collectibles.
marketplaces?
No, I actually
Oh,
sell collectibles on an online store. Now I've pivoted towards vending machines. So I've got like 6 vending machines in shopping centers because during COVID,
oh,
it
nice.
was amazing. Yeah, sales were booming during COVID. Now everyone wants to go back in the store. So online, not as strong. And plus all the iOS updates and, Facebook advertising. It's like I made a lot of mistakes when I first started. And like you said, cash
Yeah.
flow management, risk management, I got myself into a lot of debt as well. Learning and pivoting is a big strategy for me, but it is a very competitive market given because I sell Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh cards and whatnot. So that's why I started the podcast to
Pokemon.
learn
That's aging me now. Pokemon.
yeah, that's my kids love collecting, my partner. So that's where it all stemmed from. But, business is for me, I'm still learning. That's why I love learning from other successful entrepreneurs. But, there has been a lot of failures and setbacks as well. But tell me about you. How do you manage cash flow? Are you leveraging AI? What are you doing like that's working and what's not?
Yeah, it's so I started e-commerce. We were very successful. We had a couple of brands, and during the biotech kind of career, I was buying companies for the biotech. So I said, how can I do that e-commerce? How can I buy brands? So it's a bit like the real estate market in Australia or any other country. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. E-commerce after the
Yeah.
pandemic is going down. I literally just the other day, there's a major company that offered 4 e-commerce brands for $1 each to me. At $1 each. These are distressed assets. So what we've been doing is we've been analyzing. We have our brands. We started acquiring brands. We consult a bit, but acquiring distressed brands is like a refurbished house job. You buy a distressed brand, you turn them around, and then you sell them on, right? So that was one vertical that I was really concentrating for the last 18 months. I'll tell you the pivot soon. So coming back to those, so we analyze every year. I change my slides. I go on the e-commerce world and give talks to whoever accepts me. And this year is I've given talks on the data that we've seen. We've analyzed 128 failing businesses that we wanted to look at, distressed
Mm.
businesses. We only brought two, and we turned around two.
Wow.
And there's 4 things that go wrong. And it's not PPC. We can talk about PPC all, and it's not listing or image and so forth. Those are kind of baby stuff that you can change. The 4 things that are going wrong is number one, human resource management. People are paying too much for talent they don't need. They're paying too much for their own personal experiences. Everyone wants to take their team out to dinners and Tony Robbins conferences and go on team building exercises. I have no idea. Too much on legal expenses, not enough leverage with virtual assistants and workers abroad. Right. Number two, what we see is poor inventory management, too much false positive data. We looked at Q1 to Q4, all those failing businesses that were good at one point had too much false positive prehistoric data, and they ordered too much. On average, I think there was a 64% overkill in terms of inventory in Q4 because people stock up for Q4. The third thing we see is poor negotiation with Chinese or end suppliers. So not getting good terms, not saying 30/70 or 30 and 70 in 3 months or 60 days or 30 days, trying to buy some time for cash flow. So that's the biggest for cash flow. If you can buy some more time for cash flow to come through, you're winning, right? And the first two are key as well. If you can cut human resources and also your spend as well. So in terms of suppliers, on the third point still, what we find is that if you go 3 to 5 suppliers, you increase your numbers of days you have to can pay back. For example, you talk to one supplier and he goes, no, you pay 100% TT, 100% all up front for your goods, and that's how we ship it from China or whatever, your India, wherever, to your marketplace. If you go to another one and say, hey, and go back to the first one, say I'm talking to someone else, and he's giving me 30 days to, I give you 30% and the 70% you pay back in 30 days. The more suppliers you talk to, A, you have leverage, B, you have a side plan if anything goes wrong. The third thing we find is that when you show the contracts, you get more and more days off to pay back. So even if you pay 30% up front, you get more days, 30 or 60 days, sometimes up to 70 or 90 days to pay them back. So 90 days will help you immensely, but 30 days, if you're selling in America, Australia from China, it comes to Australia, China, then you got another 60 days to sell that and pay them back. So the third point is poor negotiation on terms. And the fourth point is unit economics and inventory management. Not many people are utilizing 3PLs very well and online marketplaces very well. People are very lazy, and they, for example, in LA ports, it comes out LA and they store it in LA. If it's America, use Texas, use the Midwest, use up north where it's very cheap 3PLs, right? So the way they're using 3PLs is poor as well. I don't know about Australia, but I'm sure there's states in Australia where 3PL storage is cheaper than others. So we found a staggering 87% of the 128 failing businesses should have changed their 3PL. So those four things that we see are helping cash flow for the businesses that we analyze, also the business that we're turning around, are human resources management, term negotiation, supplier negotiation, inventory management, and also the fourth thing I totally forgot I talked about is COGS, unit economics as well, and how to actually use them very well.
Cost of goods and margins is a very important one too. Some people don't understand margins, like I didn't understand margins and break evens and ROAS. Okay, so
And
beyond
also
all
that's
the
fine.
e-commerce,
I mean, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine if you don't understand, and you can keep understanding and but make sure you're changing them, because sometimes we see people not change them, and it's disastrous as the years go along.
and then they can get into even more debt without the cash flow. Thank you for the tips. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Now, beyond financial successes, what kind of long-term goals, both personally and professionally, do you have?
I want a global business that hits $1 trillion in revenue. Call me crazy. I always had crazy dreams. So yeah, big dreams. And one of the things I realized on my journey is that if you will never surpass your wildest dream. So I never got 3 Nobel Prizes, and everyone's like, "Why do you want 3 Nobel Prizes?" I'm like, Marie Curie has 2. I never got, but that kind of mentality got me to Oxford and Harvard, and I was the first in history to win the British, European, and American New Scientist Awards all in 1 year. I never thought I can do that, but because I was aiming for Nobel Prizes, 3 of them, I got a significant way in science. I'm a skinny Asian kid that is not, I'm very good in the gym, but I wanted 6 gold medals in the Olympics. They're like, why do you want 6 gold medals? I said, Steve Redgrave, this famous British rower, has five. I actually became a semi-pro weightlifter. Even now, I'm not the strongest in the gym, but the gym stops to watch me weightlift because I'm just in a different world, driven, and I just sheerly focus when I weightlift, and I can shift weight compared to my body weight. So, I always talk about squeezing the genetic potential out of you. You will never achieve your wildest dream, but that dream of gold has to be massive, because you always fall short, or you can surpass it, but very rarely. So, I don't want a regret where I said I didn't think or dream big enough. So coming back to a trillion
Yes.
dollar empire, I realized that, I literally, Linda, I got up at 3 o'clock once, and I'm like, this is not going to cut it. E-commerce, the margins are very tight now. The advertising, CPC, cost per click. And by the way, entrepreneurs, if you're doing online, you're not, a lot of people, we're not looking at CPA, cost per acquisition, right? Just because it's $2 a click, it can take 5 clicks to win a product for a customer to buy, so it becomes $10, right? So CPA, CPC, everything's gone high. I'm like, what can I do? I'm like, well, I'm buying distressed junk, right? I don't know how my mind worked it out. So I'm like, what kind of junk can I buy in the world? So I just started Googling stuff. I'm like, and there's a huge market for sustainability and junk metals. I thought, let me start selling junk metals. So I told my team, I'm literally, the next day I'm like, okay, three of us, we're going to work on junk metals. And I just roll my sleeve up, and I've been working for the last, 6 weeks, 4 weeks to 6 weeks. I've been doing 20-hour shifts sometimes, just trying to get into commodities. So
Wow.
e-commerce is one, and it's like commodities in metals, sugars, sunflower oil. If you're branding in e-commerce, you're selling a mark. How can I brand something to sell to more of the world? So most of the world uses sugars, rice, oil, and so forth. Most people cannot get it on the internet in certain parts of the world. How can I affect and serve more people? So we're now in the commodities game. By the way, it's a hard game. No matter how successful you are, there are people, you need to learn banking instruments, you need to learn about financial instruments. You will go into banks, and sometimes the bankers you're talking to, the guys who open your local branch account, will not know what you're talking about. You need to find the right trade finance specialist. We were, before this podcast, I was talking, this 3 weeks ago, I've achieved all this, and I still on that knock on doors mentality. I turned up to St. Paul's, an area in London where all the banks are, and I literally walked into 18 banks like that kid again, saying, "Hey, do you have this facility? I can open up an account here." So these are the things that, as an entrepreneur, starting a new vertical happens. So we're excited about this new vertical. We think it's something that's going to do well.
Beautiful, because you're very, very ambitious, and you're finding different things and moving along and pivoting. So that's great. I wish you all the success. I mean, how do you strike a balance between all your ambitious goals and keeping focus as well? Because like I can understand entrepreneurs have, sometimes they get excited by different opportunities, but how do you keep focus as well and make sure that the one thing that you're working on is going to become successful? Like, how do you balance that?
Three things. So number one, delegation. I'm very lucky that
Mhm.
I've worked and picked some very talented people, and picking the right people and knowing the right people to put in the right job is very important, and leaning them on, and trusting people as well quickly. Get let down, get stabbed in the back, and learn and move on and give other people chances. Sorry, can I swear in this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, just now,
Yeah.
just today, there's a big deal, and I'm like, I need someone to actually facilitate a deal, and I don't know anyone in East Africa. I randomly phone a friend. I'm like, do you know anyone on the ground in East Africa? They're like, yes, I know this woman. I phoned. I said, listen, here's an NCNDA. Here's this amount of money I give you if you can do the job. My friend trusts you. Here's the deal, go and do it. She's like, okay, tomorrow I'll do it and I'll come back and let you know. So it might work, it might not, but you got to trust people in the right places at the right time. And normally, when you give responsibility, people respond, right? So delegation and finding the right people is number one. Number two, as a leader or as an entrepreneur, you need to understand where your team needs you and where you don't need to be. And I'm very good at cutting certain things, and I call it being lazily intelligent. How do I get to A to Z very quickly and be lazy as possible? Right. And spare my time. So yeah, so I've been always good at that, just being very lazily intelligent, being intelligent enough to know where my strengths and weaknesses are, and then know my team's strengths and weaknesses and the company's strengths and weaknesses, and pivot towards the strengths and cut the weaknesses out, because there's not much you can do on the weakness side of things. So I'm good being good at that. And the third thing is, if it's not working, I'll just cut dead weight, and it will not work. Coming back to e-commerce, by the way, I'll tell you an analogy. I had a friend who spent 500,000 on Google Ads, 400,000 it worked, 500,000 it worked, 600,000 it worked. 700,000 it just started dropping, and it took me a long time to understand there's a saturation point on everything. So scaling and success is not like this. It's sometimes is like this, and learning when to stabilize it, then going again with something else. So I'm very good at over failures. I've realized when to stabilize or when to cut the dead weight. So those three things allow me to focus on the professional side. And on the personal side, it's come down to exercise. Nutrition, I can always improve, but exercise has always been my kind of go-to steadfast rock, and it helps me so much. So I exercise 5 to 6 days a week. I get half an hour in, 2 days of run, 3 or 4 days of gym, and that allows me to focus as well.
It's amazing. You're very ambitious. You're into self development, looking after yourself, and that's crucial for success, I believe. And I appreciate your time, and I thank you for your story. It's been incredible and inspiring as well, and I hope that you succeed and continue to grow
Yeah,
now
no,
with the next venture.
yeah, I appreciate your time. You got an incredible story as well. I read about you. Congratulations on your life journey as well, and thank you for doing this, because I think the more people you share these stories with, it inspires someone. I got into this to guesting because it's my way to give back, and someone's listening to your story and our stories, and you're gonna ignite someone. And if you can do it for one person, I think it's all the hard work has paid off. I had a random guy reach out on LinkedIn from Tehran, Iran, outside Iran. He's like, I don't have much opportunity. Tehran, by the way, is meant to be a highly sanctioned country. Very bright people in Tehran, by the way. And just because our media says something, but people are people, and there's millions of them everywhere, right? Billions of them. He's like, what can I do? I said, listen, you can't get a PhD, try to pivot your strategy, talk about entrepreneurship. So randomly my podcast reached this guy in Tehran, right? You don't know. And there's people in Africa and America have come past. So, thank you for what you're doing, because people like you really spread the message. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you. Finally, where can people find you and follow you?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on all social media. Pradeep Kumar Sacitharan is my kind of full name. Well, it is my full name on LinkedIn. You can search me there. Also, message me. I might be slow, but I try to get back to everyone. PK Sacitharan is my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram handle. You can catch me there as well. So yeah, I'm always here to help and serve, and like to hear stories. And if I can help you out on your journey, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. All right. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you can, please make sure you hit the like and subscribe and follow the show. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much, Pradeep.